Hi everyone, from me, Brent Graham of goodforthegame.co.za. It's Thursday night, 9 o'clock in South Africa. It's time for the Handicap Rugby Chat That Matters. Well, we're going to be looking, of course, at the Investec Champions Cup Week 2 fixtures. Then a bit of a bonus. Hang on if you're watching the show live. We're going to be talking some rugby betting strategy at the end of the show. And I can tell you I've got quite a guest list, if I can put it that way, in front of me. I've been looking forward to getting these two guys on the show together at the same time. Let's start off at the bottom of my screen. Coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand, it's the Mossman. Nathan, how are you doing, mate?
Good, thank you. Yeah, nice to be back. It's been a few weeks. I've been watching with interest though, and yeah, it's good to be on with Pablo. I've actually got a list of questions for him, so let me know when the right time is, and I'll fire away.
Excellent. So just to let people know what we'll actually do is we'll go through the games, and then we'll actually, when I say pause the show, we'll just literally, I'm going to bring another banner up and we're going to get cracking into that. And I think any time after that, you can fire through your list of questions as well. We've also got a question that the Admiral asked in the Good for the Game forum, which kind of sparked the idea about what sort of homework you do for your handicapping. But we can have just a general rugby chat after that. And let's now go to the top of the screen. And there's Pablo. Pablo looks like he might have a South African Wi-Fi connection tonight. He's looking a little bit fuzzy. He is, of course, in Spain. Pablo, welcome back to the show, mate.
Hi everybody, it's nice to be back. Yeah, I hope that the Wi-Fi connection works during the show, but I'm not sure.
Well, fortunately, the sound actually seems pretty good, so we can hear you, even if the vision might be a little bit blurry. Mark coming in from Ireland, great shirt, Brent. Of course, Mark sent me this Leinster shirt a while back. Mark, I know for some reason Mark tends to get kicked off the show. And Mark, what I can tell you is the show also goes out live on Twitter and on the Good Game Facebook page. So if you do want to, if you do get kicked off for whatever reason, and I've got no idea why, you can try and find it there. Stefan saying, what a panel, let's go. And without further ado, yes, let's get into it. Guys, I'm going to, first of all, we won't necessarily discuss it unless something catches your eye. I'm going to bring the outright betting on the Champions Cup down below. And that is courtesy of Bet Exchange. And we're going to get into the first game, which takes place on Friday night. There's been a little bit of money on this one. We got Cast up against Munster. We got Cast at the moment, -1.5. They were slight underdogs early in the week from what I can recall. And we got, obviously, playing Munster with the money horse last week. And we got a total points line here of 46.5. So, Pablo, I'm going to start off with you on this one. Any thoughts on this game? Any early money down for you?
Yeah, I posted in the forum that I put 1 unit on Castro's DMB of 2. But just 1 unit because even Castro's, they feel a really, really strong team. Not like last week that they sent like a big team to Northampton because they don't usually care about this competition. But even that, they feel a really, really strong game because usually French teams in this round, they prepare for the next top 14 round. So Munster as well, they feel a really nice team. There are a couple of absents like Gavin Coombs and Daly. But, you know, Castres at home is a really tough ask, even for Munster. So for me, just 1 unit on Castres, not big confidence, low confidence, because of the little interest they have in this competition. And about the points, I wrote in my notes because we will talk about this later, about the method, about the strategies. I wrote that this for me, I think it will be an unders play, but at 46, I find it low already. So I think no bet for me in the points market.
Right, and interesting what you say there. I saw your post on the forum, and I agree with you 100%. You know, you're saying they're hell of a strong. You're just not 100% sure what their motivation is. And we'll bring Nathan in there. Nathan, what are your views on this game?
Yeah, I'll probably preface a lot of what I'll say tonight by saying that I don't look at numbers until basically on game day. So when the teams come out, you know, that's when I sort of go through the process, produce something, and then start looking at the market. So I'm actually not really following the early week lines. It doesn't really help me much, you know. And if anything, it can be frustrating because all you're doing is just seeing, you know, potential value disappear. But you know, as I said, I'm not getting involved early in the week. So that said, I would still lean Munster here. I think this game is, the line suggests it's basically a coin flip. And I do understand that Castra's having a really good season in top 14, overperforming. There does come a point with the Champions Cup where some teams have a realistic chance of winning and some don't. And the ones that do, I think, they're obviously possibly a little bit more motivated. Obviously, I think that's probably offset here by Castra, being at home, having a good season, probably wanting to perform at a European stage in front of the fans. So I as I said, I'm leading Munster, but more for the fact that I think that they probably still feel they're a realistic chance in the competition. And in a coin flip game, I'll take the team with the European experience.
Yeah, no, I think, you're talking about game day and team selection and all the rest. I think the Champions Cup, perhaps more than any other tournament, the team selection can become so important. What is quite interesting, of course, Pablo, is to actually speculate on team selection. But I mean, things like, you can find out, for example, who's traveled and who hasn't traveled, that type of thing. Is it something you get quite, I am probably jumping the gun here, but something you get quite involved in looking at the teams, or you just wait for the teams to come out before making your call?
It depends, because if there's early info, I mean that's the info about the lineups. You don't need to wait. But in this case, for example, this match, there were not a lot of info about Castres, just injuries and things like that they don't have a big impact in the line's movement. But in this particular case, I usually wait until lineups, because as I said, Castres, they don't have interest. I agree with you, Nathan. They don't have interest. And Munster, they are the experienced European team here. But with this lineup, for me, it's difficult to go against Castres. But that's, for me, it's low confidence, not just one unit. Above 2, the odds, the decimal odds above 2, never below 2. For me, for Castres, I mean.
Right, we're going to move on to the second game. Just to mention, well, Pablo, you did message me, and you have to jump off at some stage for a minute, so we won't get a shock if you just.
Yeah, I have to go for a minute to free my dog. Thanks for
okay, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. You could pop off whenever you need to. I'm going to start with Nathan on this one. Then we got Sale at home against Racing. I did see Pablo posted on the forum on this one. Racing missing a few players, and here we got Sale -7.5, Nathan, and a points line of 45.5.
Yeah, Racing are a team that I think in general underperform to expectation. You would have been profitable, I think, if you backed against Racing, like in general, for an extended period of time. So I haven't seen the teams, but that doesn't surprise me that they are potentially either resting a few or leaving a few at home. So I think Sale is the right side here.
Okay, Pablo's popped out there for just a second, which gives me a chance. I want to bring something up with you, Nathan, quickly now. This was a post in the Good for the Game forum earlier this week, and it came from a sports bettor, and he's in New Zealand. And what he says is New Zealand will be enforcing an online betting ban offshore. And he's obviously painting it out as a bit of bad news. He obviously punts offshore at the moment. My questions to you twofold is, has it ever been legal? I mean, is it something that has been legal and they're now making illegal, or is it just something they're cracking down on? And I mean, what's the general view from punters over there?
Yeah, so it's basically what's happened is, so the legislation in New Zealand never covered sort of offshore bookmakers. So you could basically open accounts and bet with anyone unless that particular bookmaker excluded New Zealand for whatever reason. So what they're doing is, it was last year where the New Zealand TAB, the government basically sold the rights to run that to an outfit called Entain out of the UK. So they run Ladbrokes in the UK, they run Neds in Australia, probably a few other brands. So they've taken over. They were lobbying the government to bring in a monopoly, basically. So that lock that down, stop people in New Zealand from betting offshore. And this is a result of that. So that bill has sort of entered Parliament now. So it's going through the legislative process. So what they've decided to do, there's two ways you can do this. So you can go down the technology route, so basically geo-blocking, so people in New Zealand would not be able to access these sites. they've decided they can't do that. There's a few reasons why it's challenging to do, and plus there's some opposition to censoring the internet from one of the coalition parties. So what they've done is they've gone down basically the legislative route, where what they will do is they'll say it's prohibited for people in New Zealand to bet with these offshore bookmakers, and they will ask those bookmakers to ban New Zealanders. And that is, so, you know, the likes of Bet365, the big guys, they'll do that. They already do that for, you know, certain countries. You know, you'll see a list of excluded countries. So that's the route they've gone down. So yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's what's happening.
Okay. And I mean, I can tell you that from a South African point of view, we're in exactly the same situation. For example, if I try to go onto Betfair, it tells me, no, you know, you're from South Africa, you can't play. So we've had that. But I guess just the one thing in South Africa, we do have probably, I don't even know the number now. We've probably got 50 online bookmakers, probably more, registered. Yep. In New Zealand, though, it seems as though you mentioned the word monopoly. Is that essentially what we'll have here? Is basically tab New Zealand, and I mean, is there a chance that this might spur other bookmakers to enter the country, or is that quite a challenge?
So it will literally be a monopoly. Like the legislation even calls it that. So there will only be the TAB, and that's something that Entain have lobbied for, and obviously they've got that now. So there won't be any other bookmakers, and they've done that on purpose because they want that monopoly. So it's, in my opinion, it's a pretty egregious thing to try and take that choice away from consumers. So I mean, obviously, I'm not happy about it, but I knew it was coming, and I think the thing is that, you know, I'm in a way I'm kind of prepared for it. You know, we'll probably get to this later on, you know, when we're talking about strategy, but, you know, you would have heard me talking earlier about you know, forming partnerships, working with groups, that kind of thing. I was going down that route anyway. All this means is that, you know, it's just becomes more of a necessity. So yeah, so it's not ideal, but like, in a sense, the way I'm operating now, it actually doesn't make that much difference.
Right, you saw it coming. Pablo, yeah, we just had a bit of a sidetrack there while you were out, so we can bring you straight back in on this game. Sale minus 7.5 against Racing. I did see your forum post. You mentioned Racing. I think you've listed 4 players there that are missing. Yeah, we've got a point sign of 45.5.
Yeah, it's like in the other match, like in Castros against Munster. Yes, low confidence, because Sale this year they are underperforming, even with good lineups and good squad. But the point here is that Racing they are losing their center partnership, Fiku and Tuisova. Really powerful center partnership. They will feel Chavancy and Sam James is not the same level, of course. And also Tarita, the number 2, and Jordan Joseph, for me, is their best number 8. And they are quite sensible absence. Even that, for me, the forward pack is pretty powerful, the Racing one. So this is why I only put 1 unit on Sale. It's low confidence. It's like even they feel a really strong lineup, Sale, but I cannot trust them to put like a medium stake. So just 2 units in the.
Sorry, Pablo.
Yeah, just 1 unit in the -7, yeah, and nothing on points, because I have the same feeling like in the other match. Because last week, do remember we went the unders in Paris, in Pretel, between Racing and Harlequins, and the Racing defense was awesome in that match, because in the second half it didn't rain, and the defense was awesome. Yeah. So yeah, no points, because 45 for me it's well set, or even a little bit low.
Right, so narrow confidence on that one. Those, of course, are Friday night games. Just welcome to some of the guys joining the live chat. Scene has joined us. Dan joined us as well. And so Dan's saying a stellar cast. I have to agree with you there. And Scene picking up that the French teams looked really strong last week. They certainly did a couple of away wins for the French side there. Right, let's go on. And Pablo, I'm going to stick with you for this first game. It's going to be hot for this one. I can tell you, the Bulls have also been overseas, so they're also going to have to probably readjust to the weather. But we've got Bulls minus 10.5 against Northampton, a 3 o'clock kickoff in South Africa at Loftus. I can tell you, I haven't looked at the forecast, but living 60 kilometers away, I would imagine we're looking at a temperature at the time, probably mid-30s, I would suggest, for this game. So it's certainly going to be hot. What are your views on this one? Minus 10.5 Bulls, well beaten by Saracens last week.
Yeah, I think Northampton sent a strong squad, so I didn't find anything about absence or things like that because they are in full mode for Champions Cup this year. I have a question for you because I was checking the weather in the area Johannesburg and Pretoria, and I found that it may rain a little bit in the area. So I depends on the line, but I wrote here about overs in this match. But it depends on the weather because if it rains, I will change my mind.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. First of all, it's going to be interesting to see what the line is. I suspect we're going to look at a line of around 55.5 here. I don't think the bookies will come in too low for this one. And my initial instinct, Loftus in the afternoon would be overs. Two things.
Yeah.
One, the rain. So the type of rain we're likely to get is going to be thunderstorms. So they tend to hit and go. But if it hits during the game, it's obviously you can get a deluge of rain and it can really mess things up. And the other thing is just the sheer heat as well. Sometimes the European sides come out here, they actually try and slow the games down a bit in the heat/altitude. So it's going to be interesting. But if we can if they do come out around the 50-point mark, Pablo, then I'm all over. Yeah, I almost don't mind what's going to happen unless it's incessant rain. I would be looking at the overs. But yeah, I'll certainly post an update on the forum as well on the morning of the game.
Yeah, yeah. If it's in the low medium 50s, for me it's over. Yeah, and nothing on the handicap because I don't have enough info to go one side or another for the moment.
For the moment, yeah, we'll wait and see teams. There's Stephen reckons Bulls by more than 15. Don't answer this now, Pablo, but I'll bring up Patrick's comment. He's asking on the Pro D2 tonight. Well, I suppose you better answer it now. There's probably one game. Anything on the Pro D2 tonight?
I was checking lineups at 6 at 6 o'clock, and I didn't find anything convincing for them. I just wrote something about overs in one match, but maybe this week is not the time to bet in that competition.
Right, 100%. Let's go down to.
I'm actually on DAX minus 4.5 this morning.
Yeah, maybe. I have talking about that match that starts like in 1 hour.
Yeah.
I wrote under 45 and DAX minus 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
But nothing else.
The panel aligned on that one. And now we'll go down to you, Nathan, on this game, 10.5.
Yeah, I was listening to you talk about the Northern Hemisphere teams potentially trying to slow the game down, and I was thinking if you've got a South African team playing another team that's trying to slow the game down, this is going to be like Test cricket. This game will take 5 days to complete. There'll be 50 million scrum resets, and no, but looking at this, that is a big number for what is a pretty good Northampton team. Obviously, no team news, so very keen to see what happens when they come out. But yeah, I think in general, I think Northampton they're just a good team, and it's kind of difficult to back against them, I would say. So I can understand that the weather may play a part. So I'm a little bit on the fence because I can see both sides of this. So yeah, right now I would probably stay away from it.
Excellent. You coming in on Twitter, on X, should I say? I'm not going to bring your comment up now because I will bring it up for the lens the game. Johan saying points is all he cares about in this round. I'm also looking forward to that. PokerBet at one stage used to get the lines out quite early, but I assume they did take them from one of the overseas guys. But it seems on these Champions Cup games that the bookies, they're a little bit nervous to come out early. Right, that takes us into the next game. Ulster, well, they were absolutely hammered last week. They play against third favourites Bordeaux. And Nathan, we've got a handicap here at the moment of plus 11.5 Ulster at home.
Yeah. I almost never back against Bordeaux because they are probably one of, again, I tend to look not just at performances, so like at scores, but like teams that, you know, over and underperform versus the lines. And Bordeaux, you know, they're pretty exceptional in the way that even with big numbers, they can find ways to cover those numbers. Ulster are a little bit the opposite, actually. Ulster, certainly in some of my rankings, because I mean, one of the things that I'm doing is obviously I have, you know, ratings on various teams, but then as a sort of second level of analysis, I look at the teams that I'm consistently sort of right and wrong on, and Ulster often appear in that list of teams that I'm wrong about. Or when I say me, I'm saying the model numbers are wrong about, and I think it's because there's a lot of historical data that says that Ulster were really good, but I don't think the current Ulster team are anywhere near as good as perhaps the Ulster teams of the past, and they obviously, you know, leads sometimes their ratings to be overinflated. So, you know, all that said, we'll see what Bordeaux does, like in terms of their team selection, but they're just a really good team, and they have what I would describe as a kind of like a fat tail of outcomes. Like they are capable of putting up really big scores and making, you know, quite big handicaps look small.
Right, Pablo, anything to add on this game?
Yeah, here I go against the tide. Just because I like the rock and roll. I agree with most of the people that is writing, and with you, Nathan, that Bordeaux can score big, even away from home. But I just read that Jalibert is on vacation, so he won't play. They will start probably with Jalibert. Sorry, with Carberry. Is not the same player, but the rest of the team, it's what I saw is pretty strong. And you know, Ulster is it's difficult to rely on them, but for me, in European competitions, that I think that they can make this score tight. So I just put 2 units in Ulster plus 12.5. Maybe a little bit of gamble because I saw that Cooney, maybe he won't play. I'm not sure if he's fit enough to play. And there are a lot other players that are doubt as well for the moment. So maybe a little bit of gamble, but here I'm against the tide. I go with Ulster.
Right, you're leaning on the Ulsterman there. Right, let's go to the next game. We've got a big handicap here, Pablo. Leinster, minus 24.5. I was pretty impressed with them last week against Bristol. They play against Clermont, who, if I'm not mistaken, won comfortably against Benetton at home last week. Big one here, almost a 25-point handicap, minus 24.5. What are you doing here?
Here, I think that that last week Leicester, they destroyed my overs bet in Bristol. They played like for 20 minutes and they scored five tries, or like 4 tries in 20 minutes, and they did enough just to get the bonus point, and that is. But
typical Leinster.
Yeah, I think at home in the Bible Stadium against Clermont, I just read that Clermont may start with Irai Simone at 10. Yeah, believe me. Irai Simone, that is a center, inside center. They may start at 10. So the rest of the team, I think they will go strong. They won't throw this match. But even with that, I think Leinster can reach the handicap. But I'm waiting for the points because I prefer Leinster points overs because the weather will be good in the Viva. European competition, Leinster can score 30 or 60. It's Leinster.
Yeah, Pablo, before we bring Nathan in on this one, I just want to mention, because you touched on something what I've mentioned before about Leinster. Last week they left the scoring a little bit later last week. They didn't start particularly fast. Funny, I was on the under 54.5 and I was banking the money, and then in the end I was sweating because the points started flowing. But Leinster are that team that tend to go, and I expect them, especially at home, I expect them to really go hard, get the bonus point. And then the question is, do they kick on and run up a 60-point tally? Or do they almost, and I've seen them do it in the URC a few times, where it's almost like they say, right, bonus point bank, let's keep the other team from scoring. You know, and they tend to just absorb pressure. So I'm not a big handicap. I'm not a big half-time punter, but I'm starting to more and more look at Leinster games and saying overs on first half points, for example, or overs on first half tries. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that may be a good idea. Yeah, maybe better over points at halftime. I mean, Leinster 13 points at halftime rather than total, because as you said, they can put the foot of the gas in the second half. But if they have the same base as last week, they won't put the foot of the gas. That's what I'm looking for the lines, because the handicap, I think I can reach it, but for me it's maybe we'll set at 22, 23, 24. Yeah, so waiting for points here.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what the points are like there, Nathan. Big cap this one.
It is. The other thing I would say, though, is that Leinster actually, they had sort of rotated a few last week as well. So there's still the possibility that the team that Leinster put out is actually a little bit stronger than the one that from last week. So you've potentially got two teams heading in the opposite direction in terms of team selection. So Leinster could be a little bit stronger. Sounds like Clermont could be a little bit weaker. So right now, I think that number is about right, but that could quite easily change depending on what I see when the teams come out. So I think for me, it's going to be Leinster or nothing.
Right, yeah, I hear you there. And we'll be watching team news with interest on that. Now, South African interest. We've got the Sharks. They're away to Leicester. Leicester managed to get a few tries last week, but they were well beaten. They're strong favourites here, though, Nathan. Minus 10.5 for home team.
I'm just really unconvinced about Leicester, and I have been probably for around about the last sort of 6 months to a year. And we talk a lot about the Sharks, or have done, and their ability to underperform. But I actually, in this spot, I actually don't mind them. I think, although they've underperformed, I'm just not a Leicester believer at this point in time. So I think I would be leaning on the Sharks here.
Yeah, and of course, keeping an eye on team selection there. Pablo, have you heard anything in this game as far as team selections go, and what do you think of the handicap?
No, I didn't hear any news about this match, and I have the same problem. I'm quite unconvinced about this match. Actually, I don't like anything. I cannot go with Leicester, sorry, or with Sharks, because I don't know if Sharks will send a strong team. I'm not sure. And I'm quite surprised that the handicap started at -2 and now it's at -10. Maybe because there are some people that know that Sharks will send not a depleted team, but a weakened team. Sorry, but I don't have any info about this match. Not sure about the points as well. I think it will open like in the 50s, in the 50s, sorry, like 49, 48. Something like that. I don't know. For me, this match it's a no bet. It can go to 70 points or to 30 points. I'm not sure about this match.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually interesting that we're talking about the line moves as well, because as I said, I at the moment, I'm not tracking line moves all through the week because it's just not helpful for me in as part of my process. But what was interesting for me is when I went back and looked last week after the Sunday game. So there was two games, the Osprey games and the Pau game. You have to apologize if I'm pronouncing some of these French names. Is it Pau? Is that how people say it? I actually have no idea.
That's how I say it. Pablo?
So he doesn't. I'm not sure he even knows which team I'm talking about. So I'm doing it wrong.
They got like a longer version of the name. Version of the name.
It's like Section Paulet or
Palouse or something.
Palouse, is that how you say it? Anyway, I'm just going to say Pau. But anyway, the Ospreys game and the Pau game, and I was really surprised when I looked at it that those games had started sort of around the 10 or the 9 mark and then come in, because to me, I think that the Ospreys and especially Pau were clearly the right side. So sometimes I don't know what people are seeing that is causing the lines to move in certain directions. So yeah, I guess I'm not necessarily a believer in all the line movements.
Yeah, and I think. Sorry, one more thing about this. I remember last season there was a match between Leicester and Stormers. You remember that match?
The money Stormers picked a weak side in that game, and they nearly beat the Handicap. That one.
And they beat the Handicap because not the starting one. It was like -6, something like that. It ends like a -15, -16, and they lost by 9.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is probably something that we'll come to, but the thing is that when you've got people who are, effectively steam chasing, right? Like they just jump on the moving number because, they can see that it's moving and they know that there's a weakened team or those sorts of things. That number will just keep going because most of the people that are betting it don't actually know where it should stop because they don't know what the true number is. And I think that's the difference, between, maybe making your own number and actually knowing what is the value of a weakened team versus a full strength team. So, yeah.
Yeah, one other thing that I picked up, you said there about not trusting Leicester. The Sharks. So many people will say that as well about the Sharks. So Pablo might have the right strategy here in terms of just be very careful on this game with two teams, neither of which can be trusted. Johan saying Sharks overs on points, but he won't touch any handicap. Also, doesn't trust either side. And Blake reckons the Sharks forward pack could be a little green due to injuries there. Let's move on to the next game. It also involves the South African side. Harlequins up against Stormers. I know a lot when I talk about an early line, I talk about the early line in South Africa was -16.5. Often, I think there was even something like -9.5 on this game overseas when it first came out. Pablo, I'll start with you on this one. There has been something. I took 16.5, thanks to a forum post by Mondo, actually, where he was saying Stormers are likely to name a much weakened side. So the line has moved. I don't see it moving too much further. What are your views on this? Did you get on early Harlequins there?
Yeah, I was early on Harlequins. Here it opened in Bet365. It opened at -11, but I was not able to bet at the moment because I was working. I posted at -15.5 because Stormers are facing an injury crisis, I think. And I also posted wrote in the same post that sometimes when a team lost in the first round at home, they usually throw away the competition, especially when there's only 4 matches. Because if you lost one of the 2 home matches, you are out, almost out, 90% out. So taking into account the injury crisis and that approach to the competition, I thought that the value was on Harlequins -15. Even though Harlequins, they didn't play well against Racing, and this season it's quite a roller coaster for them. They play some nice matches, they play some city matches, but I think they should win heavily. Now here is -20 or -19. I think they can even reach -19. But for me, -15.5. I put another unit, so it's not 2 units. It's high confidence, 3 units in the -15.5. And about the points, there's no points yet. But weather looks good. It will be cold because it will be like 4 degrees, chilly but cold. But I think they can score big, Harlequins, if they are on point.
Yeah, I tend to be leaning with you there. I could see the Stormers potentially putting up the flag. Funny, I was also thinking of that Leicester game, though, when I was looking at the Stormers. Just because I remember them being heavily backed against and then still getting maybe not the original handicap, but certainly where it was backed out to. Just going back to the last game, you there disagreeing on Leicester. They were good for a lot of the game away to Bordeaux, and he reckons they'll cover the cap against the Sharks. Right, Nathan, back to Quins against the Stormers. It's another big cap.
Yeah, it is. And let's just, from my perspective, we'll just see what happens when the teams actually do come out. I'm not afraid to take on a big cap, but equally, I think sometimes when people look at and look, if it turns out that it's it is actually the C team, then that's different, right? Like I think the the distribution of outcomes you can get when you roll a C team out are massive, like, and there's a huge amount of uncertainty. So, in general, you want to stay clear of those things, like pretending you know what's going to happen in those situations with a bunch of players you've never seen before is, not a smart thing to do, in my opinion. So, but what often happens is, teams rotate, and the guys that are coming in aren't as bad as people think. So I'm also not, afraid to sometimes take on, a big cap when it's the B team against somebody else, because, these guys at the end of the day, they're still professional athletes, and some of the guys that are coming in from the B team, they've got a lot to prove, so there's no questions around motivation for those guys, where, it could potentially be for, other people. We've seen, we talk about, Leinster and their rotation and where, their motivation is sometimes. So it's going to be a wait and see thing. It could easily be one where I'll probably leave it alone. But with any game, right? Like, and we talk about just before about the the Sharks and not trusting certain teams. Like, there is a point where the number is too good to turn down, and it doesn't matter what the team is, right? You bet numbers, not teams.
No, fair enough, and you do get that point there. I must say, I'm looking at this game. I still think, like Pablo, I think that the handicap may not even be big enough yet, but we'll wait and see what the teams are. We'll stick with you, Nathan, for the next game. La Rochelle, I think third or fourth favourites for the tournament. They're up against Bristol, well beaten in the end by Leinster last week. And you've got to wonder then, they were at home, of course, using Pablo theory, are they going to throw the white flag up in the tournament? Minus 17.5 here, Nathan.
Yeah, and again, we'll see what happens with the team selections. But Bristol aren't a bad team, and I think admittedly I didn't see the game, but every team has a bad day at the office. Some of the previous performances by Bristol were actually pretty good. They put up a big number against Harlequins, I think maybe the week before or the week before that. So I think when Bristol have their full strength team, they actually are a decent side. So that's a big number. If both of these teams are full strength or close to full strength, I think I would be leaning towards Bristol. But it's all going to, the teams, I've said this before, like they tell you a lot about their motivation based on the selections, right? So there's from my perspective, it's kind of a wait and see thing.
No, 100%. I must say, Pablo, just on that, I'm sort of expecting Bristol to perhaps field a bit of a weakened side. Yeah, I mean, they might surprise me or not. And on that basis, they could get a little bit of a hammering. I do agree with Nathan, the full strength teams against each other. I'd give Bristol certainly a good crack at this handicap. What are your views on this one?
Yeah, I think it's like with the Stormers, but here I have a different opinion, because Bristol they may say that's a strong team. I'm not sure about that, but let's remember again about last season. Bristol, they sent a depleted team against Bordeaux the second round. You remember, with a lot of youngsters. The handicap was like above 30, something like that, 33. I remember 34, and they lost by less than 20 points, like 18 or 19, something like that. I remember well because I was with Bordeaux. So this is why I remember that match. So if I have to go, of course I have nothing early, but of course La Rochelle will go strong because they won they defeated Bath in a really difficult match in Bath last week, so they will go strong. But if Bristol are in for the competition, even losing the first match against Leinster, handicap is at plus 17, 18. For me, it's big. But yeah, depends on the lineups here.
Well, you mentioned Bath. We'll stick with you. That was a hard game last week against La Rochelle. They're now away at Benetton. Benetton plus 4.5. They, of course, lost on the road last week to Clermont. And it's interesting because as much as Bath lost to La Rochelle, I didn't think they were too bad, Pablo. And the question is now, if they were playing a strong team, you might expect them to throw the sort of towel in this tournament. But playing against Benetton, they might fancy their chances. What do you think we're going to get here?
I'm not sure about this match as well. It started here at plus 10 for Benetton. Now it's plus 3. It's maybe because Bath will send a weekend team, and I don't have info about this. But for me, Bath is far stronger team than Benetton. Far stronger team. If the handicap, tomorrow when lineups are released in the handicap, it's still at -3 for Bath, and they send a strong team. For me, they should win by more than 3. But for the moment, no bet, because I don't have any info about this. So I cannot understand why I started at +10 and now it's at +3 with no info. Because Bath, if you choose both a strongest team for both, Bath is far stronger than Benetton for me.
Yeah, agree with you. There must be. You would think that there's probably some information out there that the public are not necessarily all privy to, or it could just be people making assumptions, I guess. Nathan, what do you think on this one? Presumably also waiting for team news here?
Yeah, I actually don't have a lot else to add other than what Pablo said. Pretty much agree with all of that. I think at times the Italian teams, especially on Benetton, they still suffer from, I think, bad PR. Like, as in everyone assumes that these Italian teams are all whipping boys, and to be fair, Zebre, kind of are. But Benetton actually aren't. But I think sometimes they're still perceived as being that way.
Right, Johanna's going on the bar minus. We'll stick with Nathan for the next game. We're nearing the end of the Investec Champions Cup week 2. Toulon -4.5 against Glasgow. This should be, for me, one of the games of the weekend to watch.
Yeah, I actually think this line is kind of spot on, based on if everything sort of stayed the same and the teams kind of rolled out what they did last week. I think this is well set.
Stephen is saying, I think, a 50-50 game, which is pretty close to what he's saying here. Admiral, let's just see what he said. There was a Bath journo who said they would send a weak team. So that is what sparked just going back to the previous game, that's probably what sparked the movement. Johanna's saying Toulon 1-12. Pablo, what are you doing on this game?
I agree. I totally agree. For me, I have an early line of. I have a 5-point difference for Toulon. So for me, it's well set this handicap. Yeah, Toulon, it's a Champions Cup team. This year, they have a strong team. They are performing well, even away from home. They didn't win a lot in top 14, but they earned a lot of bonus points, defensive bonus points, and at home they are playing really well. So even if Glasgow are on point, for me this handicap is well set. Yeah, they may go overs in my opinion, about 50.
Yeah,
but the handicap for me is well set.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And for me, just Glasgow have really taken a step up over the last couple of seasons. In the old days, I would certainly be piling onto the French team minus here, but I'm very impressed with this Glasgow side. They never give up. 2 more games to get through. Pablo, we'll go with you on this one. Stade Francais +6.5 against Saracens. Saracens getting that good win over the Bulls last week. Stade Francais getting well beaten. So what do we do here? Stade Francais going to put up an honourable performance at home, or do we think the Saracens will take them apart?
This is, I don't know how you call it, but banana skin. How you call it? Potential banana skin. Yeah. I was looking at the probable Stade Francais lineup. If Saracens are on point, they should win by more than this. But playing at home, Stade Francais, they are not playing bad. I think they only lost 1 match against Toulon this season. Not sure about this match because I don't like Stade Francais lineup. It's Barrett's back from vacation, Macalou as well, and the center partnership it may be Ward and Marchand. It's pretty strong. Weber at 9. But the first row of Castells at 1, I don't like it because Terra is like it's on vacation in Paris. It's not like last season player in Treviso. Sorry. The picture they showed in Munster, it was really poor with 2 red cards. I'm not sure if that affect this match, but for me it's better to avoid this kind of teams because last week Stade Francais was brainless. With that 2 red cards were brainless, not needed, And they didn't lose by more than 20 points because Munster were poor as well. But I prefer to stay out of this match.
Yeah, I was under their points last week. I think it was at 12.5. I think they ended up, what did they get, 7 or something along those lines. Hugh reckons that Starter could win here if they put out a proper team. Nathan, penultimate game, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I'm sort of projecting this to be Saracens by 8, but the flip side to what Pablo was saying about Stade Francais is that I actually have quite low confidence in Saracens as well. So, I mean, last week clearly overperformed in beating the Bulls, and that's a positive. But if you go back a week before that, I think they went out as, over a 2-try favourite, maybe something close to 20, I can't remember, against Newcastle, and only just scraped home with a win. So that was a really poor performance, massively underperformed. So Saracens are a little bit all over the place. I think they're kind of lacking a little bit of the Saracens identity that they've had in past years. So it's one where I don't know. I don't have like a good read, I guess, on either of these teams. So I think the banana skin is actually a pretty good description.
That's the banana skin game. We've got one left. We'll get Nathan first crack at it. Exeter plus 17.5 against Toulon. Exeter quite well beaten by the Sharks, but they scored a few tries. And Toulon, well, they looked. This will be Toulouse, eh? Sorry, I've got this one wrong.
Toulouse. Yeah.
I thought this. I suddenly looked. But Nathan, obviously that's Toulouse, who looked bloody impressive. They're the 37-20 favourites to win the tournament. What do you think on this one? Exeter at home.
Yeah, do you know what? I think a lot of this, and I never like to focus too much on one player, because I think a lot of times people do overemphasize the importance of individuals. But I think a lot of this comes down to whether Dupont plays or not, right? Like, it's the numbers, I think, when he plays versus when he doesn't are they're pretty crazy. When I look at a Toulouse handicap and Dupont is there, it's very difficult to go against that. So I think at the moment that number is about right. But if he plays, I think that number can potentially look pretty small. So, but they do have a habit of just picking and choosing their spots where some of these guys would play. So I think if there is some rotation there, they're probably. I might lean Exeter, but this is all sort of dependent on team news.
And Nathan, just quickly, team news for this tournament. Now, this is obviously a Sunday game, but do all teams have to come out on the Friday? We don't have to wait for about sort of 2:00 tomorrow. Well, let's say South African time or over there. We should have all the teams by Friday evening.
Yeah. So what they do is the Friday games come out. At a particular, I guess it's the Thursday midday, and then all of the rest of the games come out on the Friday midday. So they'll do the Saturday and the Sunday, which is good because it works differently actually. So with top 14, for example, you have to wait another extra day to get the Sunday teams, which doesn't happen in the Prem.
Okay, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I just wish they would do what they do in Super Rugby. I think it's Wednesday or something like that. They bring all the teams out, which would
tell me about it. Yeah.
That would be good. Right, Pablo, we bringing you in for the final say here. We'll quickly have a look at best bets. I do appreciate that you guys may not have your best bets yet because you're waiting for team news and that. So we'll just touch on that. And then just to let the guys watching now, we're going to take a short break, probably like 20 seconds while I just set up, and we're going to then start talking a bit of betting strategy. So don't go away at the end of the usual handicap show. Right, Pablo, 17.5 Exeter at home.
I just read that Toulouse will go strong, so no rotation expected. They will go with everything to Exeter. If Exeter was like in previous seasons, of course, Exeter plus 17, but the line wouldn't be the same, of course. I think if weather is okay, it's like the kind of match that can go overs. But yeah, depends on the weather. I didn't check the weather yet for Sunday, only for Friday and Saturday, so I'm not sure about the weather. But I think Exeter is a proud team. Imagine losing by more than 20 points at home, but they lost against Harlequins by 17 this season in Premiership. So it wouldn't surprise me if they lost by more than 17. But yeah, I'm not sure about the handicap, so no bet for me, even with a strong Exeter lineup. So I wait for points here to go overs.
I was going to ask you that because that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I thought Exeter, even against the Sharks, they showed a bit on attack, but they were pretty weak on defense. So this could, depending on conditions and teams, well be an overs play. And of course, also dependent on the line. See what the bookies bring that out on. Right, let's just touch on any best bets or any games that you're keeping a really close eye on the weekend. Pablo, we'll start with you.
Yeah, as I said, Harlequins minus 15, 3 units. And that's the only bet I have now. Sorry, apart from Ulster plus 12, but that's not the best bet for me. It's for 2 units, but not the best bet. I'm waiting for overs in Pretoria, Bulls against Northampton, Leinster overs, and that's in Champions Cup. And also points in Exeter to lose. But I also have a couple of comments in Challenge Cup. Can we talk about Challenge Cup?
Yeah, go for it. Mention your Challenge Cup bet.
Okay.
I'm not going to go through each game, but if there's anything that you want to mention there in the challenge, I just find we get lines so late here in South Africa. I don't know what it's like over there, but the lines are out so late. But anything you fancy there, go for it.
Yeah, there's only line for Friday match between Edinburgh and Bayonne in Edinburgh. Edinburgh they go strong, so Anguilla is quite good. Bayonne with a little bit of rotation, but I like the team. So for me, now the line is 50.5. I went over 2 units in that match because almost no wind. 3 degrees is a little bit cold, but I think Edinburgh can score big, and Bayonne. I mean, they won against the Scarlets, but they don't care about the competition. But they can score as well, like a couple of tries, one penalty, something like that. And about Saturday and Sunday matches, I think Lions they will destroy Po, because Po they don't care about the competition. They defeated Newcastle because Newcastle is even poorer than Po in Challenge Cup, but I think Lions can score if the weather is okay, because they play in Johannesburg. We talk about the weather like in the Bulls Northampton match. If weather is okay, I think Lions can score 50 points, no problem.
Right, Lions to win big there, says Johan as well, and he also put his treble up there. Right, Nathan, anything for you that stands out at this stage, or that you like Pablo are waiting for in particular?
I think there's kind of waiting on a whole bunch of things, really, but just of the things that we've talked about. And as I said in the beginning, would sort of preface this by saying that, quite often I could say one thing now and then bet the completely opposite side once some of the news comes out. So, but I think Munster, I think they're good enough to keep that game close, and as I said, might be for a game where they're catching 4.5. It might be sort of close to a coin flip. And although we talked about 2 teams that not necessarily trust, depending on what happens with the Sharks, like if they did put out a decent team, I do actually quite fancy the Sharks on the plus. But again, all of that could change and go out the window depending on what happens with teams.
Right. Well, that brings us to the end of the handicap for this week. We've talked about all of the Champions Cup matches, but stay tuned. We're going to be talking a bit of rugby strategy in about 20 seconds. What I'm going to do, and the reason I'm doing this is to sort of cutting it here so that I can then, it will make it a bit easier to cut out this part of the show. We can put it separately on the site for guys who want to hear the strategy chat, because one thing about these handicap shows, come sort of Saturday morning, Sunday morning, they're no longer of any value to anybody with all the games having gone. So we're going to take a very short 20-second break, and we'll be back to chat rugby betting strategy. Okay, everyone, we're back. It's 53 minutes into the handicap show, but time to talk some rugby betting strategy. Got a topic for the show, but we don't necessarily have to stick to that topic. We'll certainly touch on it, but I'm quite happy for the show to veer off, and I'm also quite happy to sit back and just let my guests chat a little bit, because these are two guys who've probably got different strategies to rugby, I would imagine. We'll probably find out as we chat. But certainly very well-respected punters, and I know the guys on the Handicap show enjoy it when they're on and listening to them. And also, of course, Pablo in the forum. He's a regular in the forum and makes some very shrewd postings indeed. So let me just get things going by first of all saying, if you do like the Good for the Game shows, hit the like button and the subscribe button, and make sure you hit the bell to get notified. But this is what sort of prompted it. The Admiral, who I saw was in the live chat earlier as well, he asked, I won't read the whole post there, but essentially what we were talking about is what sort of homework he does on a Sunday night. Now, I tend to handicap games on a Sunday night. I haven't done it for the Champions Cup. And the reason is that I just don't have that feel for the Champions Cup. I don't watch enough of the Gallagher Premiership. I don't watch any of the top 14. And I didn't get, even though I actually had a pretty good weekend from a pure tipping perspective last week, I actually didn't get to watch a lot of games. So if I don't have a feel, then I don't handicap it. But what he's mentioned here in his post is that he spends 30 to 45 minutes on a Sunday, having a look at Instagram accounts and all the rest, essentially preparing himself for what could happen in the week so that he's not surprised. Kind of reminds me, if you're trying to get fit and lose weight, you prepare your diet on a Sunday night, and I guess it's something along those lines. So I don't think we could have two better guests to talk about this. And Pablo, let me start with you there. You've obviously been involved with rugby punting for some time. Tell us a little bit about your, let's call it your prep work, if any. I mean, I guess some people wait till game day and don't do any prep, but yourself, I noticed that you're normally pretty good at getting on the early lines. What sort of prep work do you do on, for example, a Sunday or a Monday, perhaps before the bookies come out with their lines?
Yeah, look. You see this?
Yeah, let me look down. Sorry, that one. Yes, we can see that. I can't read it, but I can see it.
Yeah. That's the work I do on Sunday evenings. It's all the betting, rugby betting matches for the following week. I do on Sunday evening, usually after the round. After sometimes there is like a top 14 match at 9 on Sunday, so I do before and during that match. When I'm watching it, I usually watch that match, and I wrote every match, the local time. Now there's no problems because all the matches are in Europe, but when there's a super rugby, you have to remember that they play in New Zealand or Australia. It's not the same time. And I start to put what I lean when there's no lines, still no lines. It's like, for example, this week is the first match, Castres against Munster. And I started to write what I like with no points and nothing else. I like this, I like this, and like this. And after writing all the matches, I leave a space for the weather, temperature, humidity, and wind, and another space for rain if it will rain during the match. I think it's important because the weather affects a lot to a rugby match. I mean, there's not the same approach for a dry match than for a wet match. So you should take into account that weather is important. At least it's for me important. And I take like the last. Now that we are like in the mid-season, I take, for example, for Castres and Munster, I take all the home matches for Castres in top 14 that they play this season, and all the Munster away matches that they played in URC. And that I usually, I always write the results they had during the season. This season, that is very useful at the mid-season and the end of the season, but not at the beginning of the season because there's no previous results. Your previous results are from the season before, and there are players that are not this. I mean, players leave teams, so you can take those matches from previous seasons with carefully because it is not doesn't affect the same that the matches play with this squad during this season. So I write the scoreboards. I take the mean scoreboard for example, for casters during the 7 or 6 matches they played in top 14 this season, and the matches they play Munster away this season. And more or less, you can have a picture of what kind of match of what kind of match, talking about points and handicap, you will have. So it's like an early picture of the match. And when lines opens usually here the lines opens on Monday morning, usually, because you see Challenge Cup, they don't open until they release lineups. So they open Friday night. So it is useful with Challenge Cup and regular and top 14 Premiership and URC and Pro Day. So you have an early picture of the matches you will have next weekend on Monday morning, and when you see the lines, more or less you can find, if there's value, you can find it, because it's intuitive for me. It's like, for example, when the line in Harlequins opened, this Harlequins against the Stormers, when it opened on Monday at -11, for me there was no value in Harlequins at the beginning. For example, I have like a 15 points different for Harlequins for this match at the beginning, like my early picture. But with team news, it's not the same. Your picture changed a lot. So the value that was, or the value that was with Stormers, or no value, now the value changed and go with Harlequins. It's something like that, but it's very intuitive. And you also have to take into account, for example, I also look at the next, not only this next round, but the following one. Because, for example, in top 14 in France, in top 14 and Pro Day, teams usually rotate not in order to play this match, but the next one, because they are focused on the next one, especially if they play at home. Usually they rotate when they play away, and feel a strong team when they play at home. They Premiership teams don't do that. They don't usually do that, but French teams, they usually do this. And I mean, that's, you know, this, you can have an early picture and make early bets. And of course, for the matches I don't bet early, I wait until lineups. For me, lineups are critical. Here, the lineups, they are released Friday midday and Thursday midday for Friday matches, and Friday at midday for the weekend matches. So at that time I'm with the mobile phone or with the computer, and you should be quick in order to find value that there wasn't at the beginning, or in order to close a bet that you think there were value at the beginning but not anymore. I don't know if you get my point.
Yeah, yep. And I think a couple of things I just want to pick up from there. I mean, I think the speed is so important. I've seen how quickly those lines move. I'm actually quite surprised more bookmakers don't actually spend for that hour or so to stop themselves being so vulnerable to those moves. But another thing I just wanted to ask you...
Bet365 do that. Bet365 so a couple of minutes before midday UK time, they will grey out the Prem and UAC. They'll grey it out, and it doesn't come back up for 5-10 minutes. I suspect what they're doing is they're looking what's happening elsewhere. They're probably looking at Pinnacle, looking at some other things, and they're figuring out which way it's going to go. And when they repost it, it's moved, which is smart. They don't do that for Super Rugby and NPC, because I guess it's happening in the middle of the night there. So because it requires some sort of manual intervention, so they'll have a trading team, and the overnight trading team is kind of the B team, and they'll just let that ride.
Yeah, here, Bet365 started to block markets like 3 years ago, if I remember well, or 2 years ago, because before 2021 they didn't block markets when lineups release. But I don't bet in Bet365 anymore, because I bet in Asian odds, the former Pinnacle, and exchanges, because in Spain we have a same problem that in New Zealand, because here, if you win money with Spanish bookmakers, you get limited and banned. So you have to find another way to earn money. So with the private network, you have to bet on Asian bookmakers. Is what I do. and there they don't block markets. They release lineups, so it's easier to bet.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. So, because Pinnacle is not available in Spain, right?
No, it's not illegal to bet, but I take the risk.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's cool. And so sort of Asian Connect 88 or Bet in Asia, those kind of broker services, you can use those.
Yeah, but with VPN.
With VPN, yeah, with VPN. No, that's kind of interesting because that's kind of a similar sort of scenario as what we're going to end up with here in New Zealand. So it's really interesting. So, what is the I guess the selection of bookmakers like in Spain? So, do you have more than one local, Spanish bookmaker?
Yeah, there are, if I remember well, like 40 or 50.
Wow. Okay.
But not all of them local. I mean, in total, there are like 50, something like. But local.
Okay. Yep.
Like maybe 5. But it's the same problem with Bet365. They block the accounts.
Yep.
So they limited you with. I mean, I'm talking about earning 1,000 euros. I mean, if you are a professional bettor, you. I mean, you will move money. You earn more than that. So 1,000 euros you can earn in a good week, in a very, very good weekend. So you can get blocked unlimited in one weekend.
Yeah, no,
so it's
for
like it's like having nothing here.
Okay, no, that's interesting to know. Yeah, and are you working sort of completely alone?
Sorry?
Do you work alone? Do you work with anybody else?
No, alone. I have a couple of friends. Sometimes I posted on the forum. One of those. He's from the south of France, and he's a connoisseur of the Pro D. He's the one that he knows the info about Pro D. Sometimes about top 14. So it's like really, really insider info because he's from Montalban that playing in Pro D. So sometimes he has a really good info.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. And so you sort of mentioned that a lot of your stuff was quite intuitive. Do you make your own numbers for a game, or is it more and are you using sort of a spreadsheet or something for that, or is it more just purely intuitive like you were saying?
No, I do my numbers. When I was talking about taking the previous results, like the 5, 6, 7 previous results.
Yeah.
You cannot weight all the results in the same way because sometimes one match they rotated, there was raining, the match was in dry conditions. You have to more or less take put weight on those results, and after that you do like a mix. Like a cocktail, and you have like a scoreboard.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
So it's not objective, it's subjective. It's like you have to make your own opinion, but also taking into account the numbers you have.
Yeah. No, totally understand. It's actually interesting because I think about the way I used to do things was probably a lot like what the Admiral was describing. So, when I first started doing this, which was, doing NPC, I had some power numbers, which I'd kind of, reverse engineered out of results just by doing it in a sort of spreadsheet. Like something as simple as like, I'd take the previous season's margins, handicaps, like or what the score differential was, and then I'd just chop out the outliers, and then I'd look at the mean and the median and just kind of come up with a number that felt about right. And that was my starting point for power numbers. And then what I'd do is as the games sort of progress through the season, like I just upgrade and downgrade teams. So again, it was quite subjective, and it was all manual. And so that's where I sort of started. And then because I come from a background in tech, like I was able to sort of automate things, started doing stuff in terms of coding and machine learning and a few other things. So my process now is kind of completely different. Like, whereas I don't actually touch anything in the early part of the week. I don't read any team news, partly because it becomes like a timed thing, right? So if I could spend all that time doing all that, or I could actually just build a better model that can beat the closing line. And that's how that's kind of how I'm judging things, right? So one of the inputs that I have is the Pinnacle closing line, and when I'm back testing, a model or making numbers, whatever it is, like I'm looking like, would this have beaten the Pinnacle close? And if I can do that, and I can beat the Pinnacle close at 55%, between 55 and 60, I know that there's probably two things. I can find a better number than the Pinnacle number, and I'm also betting probably, let's say 12 hours before the close. So in general, like, you're always going to be doing a bit better than whatever that number is. So like if it's, let's say you've got a model that can do 55%, and then you say, okay, well, I can probably do another 2% by not betting Pinnacle, and then I can win at another 2% by not betting the closing number, and then I can probably add on another 1 or 2 by just excluding teams where I know the rating is wrong. So like, for example, in my kind of, similar to you, I've got like kind of a weekly battle card. And one of the things that I've got is so if I'm looking at top 14, for example, all the teams, and then it's like the plus minus on whether I was right or wrong when I was high on them, when I was optimistic on the number, and then when I was pessimistic. So when I look at like Russing, for example, like it's a -3 when I was on them to cover, and then a 2 when I was pessimistic. So I know that my rating for them is too high, because whenever I'm on them, I lose, and when I'm against them, I win. So I'm kind of like, I can look at a game, and if the number is telling me to bet Russing, I can say, okay, that's probably a wrong number. So I can exclude that game, and that's probably adding another, % or something, because it's one thing to find winning bets, but if you can exclude the losing bets, that's worth 1.2 of a win, 1.1 probably, because obviously the VIG, right? A loser is worth more than a win. So so there's probably a whole lot going on there, but like basically what I'm doing now is then I'm only really betting on game day. I'd prefer not to actually get CLV at all if I could help it, because if you can win without getting the closing line value, I think it's less obvious to bookmakers. Like they when they run these, and this is just things I've read from listening to people and listening to other podcasts, but when they run reports, traders, and they do reviews, they're looking for people who are consistently beating the closing line. So if you could just win by beating into the closing line, you're probably going to stay off the radar for a little bit longer. And the other thing, of course, is the later you bet, the bigger the limits are, right? So instead of having to do, which I was doing and still have to do to some extent, is I might have to make bets in 5 or 6 different places to get to the number that I want. Like if you want to start betting in 4 figures, you're probably not going to be able to find one place that can do it unless you bet later, right? Like if you bet, and these Champion Cup games are actually a good example, because you could go onto Pinnacle shortly before close, and you could bet 2,000 US a pop, and that would be, you could hit that number and that would move it maybe 3-4 cents, and then you could hit it again. So you can get to a big bet size pretty quickly betting late. You'd bet it earlier in the week, that limit will be 200. And one of the things I would say about betting early versus betting late is if you think about bookmakers, they are paying you for information. They go through a price discovery, which is the time that they post that number to the closing price, right? And they're getting that information for cheap earlier in the week, right? So because if you put a bet on for $200, they'll say, cool, like, you're giving me information, I'm giving you your $200 bet, so that you're actually they're paying quite a cheap price for it earlier in the week. Whereas, for me, it's kind of like, okay, if I hold back and I don't give them that information, it's worth more later. But, the flip side is that, like, I'm not going to get those kind of numbers. Like, we're talking about that Harlequins bet. I'm never going to get that, 6 points of closing line value. I used to back in the day, but I don't do now. But the other thing is, like, I guess I spend less time sort of sitting in front of the screen waiting for things to happen. So, there's a time value of money. Obviously, you got a family and all the rest of it. So, like, in some ways, if I can just spend some time in an evening running numbers and then get to a point in the week where I'm going, bang, I'm just going to fire on all these things. I'm just going to put 10, 15 bets in all right now, and rather than sort of having to react in your week as things start moving and stuff becomes a bit more of a moving target. So yeah, I guess it just gives me a bit more control of my own schedule as well, if that makes sense. Sorry, there was a lot to unpack there, but
No,
it is quite a complicated thing. So,
and I mean, I think about your strategy, and I mean that's why like you said, 10, 15 games, and you fire at all of them. Like I look at last weekend for me. I mean, this is an example. Not okay. I wasn't able to watch games, and I do enjoy watching games and betting. I'm probably more as much as I like to consider myself quite a serious punter type in some ways. At the end of the day, for me, I do enjoy watching the games as well. But I was on like 12 out of 14. I got correct last week of the bets that I put up on good for the game. And I scraped a profit on the weekend. Now, that wouldn't happen to you, Nathan. If you were 12 out of 14 correct, you're having a good weekend. But I didn't have a consistent, I was a bigger bet there. This one was more in multiples. So what happened was the two games that I got wrong, being overs in the Stormers game and over 44.5 in the Lions game, which was heartbreaking. If anyone watched that final conversion, it looked for money like this through the middle, and it ended up 10 meters short. But I just structured things incorrectly. If I'd had your approach to those games, I would have had 12 out of 14. Yeah, would have been a profit for sure. So you don't get involved in like multiples and stuff like that, hey? You just straight on the nose.
That's right, yeah. And I pretty much, I'm just flat staking because I know, so I can back test all my numbers and I know that, I can say get to a 60% win rate, but I don't necessarily, it's calibrated to get to the right side of the line. It's not calibrated to try and predict exactly what the number's going to be. So if it's 1-2 points off the line versus being 5 or 6 points off the line, I can't look at that and go, oh cool, well I know that's twice as much confidence, so I'm going to bet twice as much. It just doesn't work that way. So it was interesting because when I listened to Pablo and you're talking about your unit sizes and I guess which is your sort of confidence level, I can't really do that, but I'm interested to know what goes into your staking size. How do you come up with that?
Yeah, usually I have only three levels of stake. I think a lot of people they have 5, but for me it's like with 3 it's more than enough. For me it's like low confidence is 1 unit, medium confidence is 2 units, and high confidence is 3 units. Medium confidence is when for me the line is mismatched in my favor between 5 to 10 points. I mean, when I think that the line is wrong 5 to 10 points, it's for 2 units. When it's above 10 points, that is very unusual. I mean, it's my opinion, but sometimes in my head the line is grown by more than 10 points. In that case, it's 3 units. And when it's below a score, usually when I write in the forum, when I say it's for me, the difference is 1 score. When it's 1 score, 5 points. I try with no conversion. It's just for 1 unit.
Gotcha.
That's for me more or less the difference. Maybe once or twice a year, I put more than 3 units. But it's once or I remember. When Chile played against Lions like 1 month or 2 months ago, do you remember that in Parma, the result was 9-10 to Lions. They won. The line opened.
I do remember that the rain game. Yeah.
Yeah, the rain game. Do you remember? The line opened in exchange because I didn't say at the beginning, but my early lines I take in exchanges, so I cannot get limited, not in Pinnacle or PS really great. I do in exchange, so you cannot get limited there. And the line opened at 57, and I was checking the weather on Monday, Tuesday, and it was like, come on, it will rain cats and dogs. So in the match I put 4 units, but very unusual. Once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, like 80%. Oh, sorry, 90 between stake 1 and stake 2 is like 95% of my bets.
Gotcha. Yeah. I see there's a question from the Admiral. That's a good question. I'll come to that. Just what you were saying about the exchanges in the early week. I mean, what's the liquidity like in an exchange early in the week? Because when I'm looking at Betfair, just finding that it's so low outside of international games are great. But outside of that, it just seems really, really low. Like, are you taking bets, or are you market making, as in that you are putting money up there, you're laying the result and trying to get other people to take your bets?
Sometimes you can put your bet, sometimes, and sometimes you. In points, it's impossible to do an early bet because the limits. Sorry, usually liquidity. You can put like the liquidity is like 100, 150. My unit. It's 150 euros, so 2 units, 300 euros. So for points, it's impossible to place a bet. You can mark the line, and if there is a fish, they bet against you, so you have the bet. But in handicaps, you can put 2 units usually.
Yeah.
So, but you have to do a little some tricks, because when they, for example, it's incredible to hear, but in my exchange, it's Orbit, there is less liquidity in Champions Cup than in top 14, for example.
Yeah, interesting, because it's with Pinnacle, it's the opposite. So yeah,
it's weird, but in exchanges, it's the opposite. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I cannot understand the reason.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. I saw Admiral's question. So I think in terms of does the ROI dip? So 2 things. Like, I think in general, yes, it will go down, like the later you bet into the week. And the reason for that, of course, is that, there's just, you don't get the freebies. And the freebie is the, like, Northampton against the Bulls last year, right? Like, I mean, there wasn't a number in the market that you couldn't have taken Northampton that you wouldn't have won, because, it started out with, I think, it started out with maybe the Bulls as a half-point favorite, and then everybody realized that they were sending the C team, and that number just went bang, 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 and it might have closed like 23 or 25, and they won by 50 or whatever it was. So you're not going to get those kind of freebies, like as in the absolute gifts. But 2 things happen. So what's happened is the ROI would naturally go down, but because I have that extra time that I was talking about, because I'm not sitting in front of the screen and I'm not having to do some of the manual kind of research, I can devote that time into improving my model, which I've done. And I think it's kind of kept pace with that dip in ROI. So I can maintain the same kind of win rate just because I'm focusing my time in a different area. So I don't feel like I've lost anything by dropping into that kind of game day process. And I think the last part about turning a similar profit. I mean, it's like when I think about when I started doing this in the very first NPC season, and I ground out an entire season to, make a few thousand, and now that could literally be like one weekend. Like it's because the scale of it is just so much bigger.
Right. Well, now we got a question also from the Admiral for Pablo. Do you ever think about the variability of the game? I.e., your cap is 14 points different to a bookie, but there are a lot of random factors. So maybe you only go 1 or 2 units. And I think in a way, Pablo, that's kind of what you've done with the cast game this week. Like you see them as quite strong favorites, but the variability is, are they taking the tournament seriously? What's your response to that one?
Yeah. No, my lowest unit is 1 unit. I mean, no half units. But for example, talking about casters, that there's a lot of factors, motivation. I mean, we can talk about numbers, but we cannot talk about motivation because it's psychological. So in that case, when, for example, in that match, talking about casters, I have like a 10-point difference for casters, but I think that the motivation is not the same like Munster have. So in that case, line is for 2 units, but with that factor, I put just 1 unit, but never below 1 unit. So that's the part that you add to the stats. You have your numbers, and you put your opinion and your experience in the mix, and you have like you do like boo, and you have you have like your line.
I'm going to just bring up another question here, and you don't have to go into detail on this one, guys. But Sudesh Shams is saying, what are your figures looking like for 2024? And I guess you can answer that by saying, it's been a good year, or it hasn't been my best year. And yeah, so I'd be interested in that, because I mean, myself, I've had 11 out of 12 profitable years, but sometimes I've been in real. Look, I think I'm a bit less disciplined punter than you guys. So sometimes I've been in trouble, and I've had to come back and this and that. But I also don't bet as much as I used to, because I can't afford, once I got a family and that, I just couldn't afford to take the big knocks that could potentially be there. So I'll start with you then, Nathan. What's 2024 looking like, just if you had to compare it to other years? Or, I mean, obviously you, as far as I'm concerned, you wouldn't be sticking with your model if it wasn't working for you. But how are you doing compared to, say, some of the other years of rugby?
Yeah, 2024 is an interesting one, because it's kind of a year of two halves, I guess, in a sense that when I got to the end of Super Rugby, and that was, at that point, I was like, right, like I'm sort of going to go hard at this, and that's when I sort of started to scale up things, working with partners, that sort of thing. So what happened was, like, I think the bankroll, which everyone should sort of have set aside, as like, this is what I gamble with, like I had, maybe I'd worked for 1.5 years or 2 years to get to that point mid this year, and then I doubled that by in the next couple of months, just because of the scale was so much bigger. Like I was saying, that it's just the numbers involved were bigger. So I think if I think about it from maybe the second half of the year, then like NPC was a funny one in that the win rate was the same, but I sort of the staking for various reasons didn't work out as well. So I actually, like, I had the same win rate, but my ROI went down because I was losing. I lost some of the bigger bets, which is, again, sometimes why flat staking is just so much easier. So ROI was down, but that was still profitable. And then Prem has been really bad. But the flip side is that my top 14 has been really good. So those two things kind of tend to even out. And the other thing that happened is I wasn't doing internationals previously, and I kind of didn't think that the process that I had would work for those. But I gave it a go, and it turns out it's as good, if not better, than most of the other things, which really surprised me, because I would have thought, you've got a highly liquid market, like as in the liquidity on international games is, it can be 10 times what it is on some of these other things. Like, it's really, really easy to get down big numbers on internationals. So I thought big numbers, it's going to be more efficient. It doesn't appear in my reckoning to be more efficient at all. And it might just be because the general public just bet internationals, and they just bet their favorite teams, and they just bet what they watch on TV, and they don't really know what they're doing. So you get this flood of public money, which is, square money. It's not at all sharp, which actually just makes the pool bigger. And it means that, it's easier for the sharks to find things to eat, I guess. Yeah. So I think in general, I'd say when you're spread out across a whole bunch of leagues, some will be up, some will be down compared to previous years. And it looks like, to me, like it's working out, about the same, which is good. So there's probably a question for you, Pablo. Which leagues are you operating across? Do you do Prem and URC as well? Because I remember you mentioned Super Rugby. Do you do NPC?
Yeah, I do all of them. Okay. Yeah, NPC, Super Rugby, and European ones. Yeah. I mean, the big ones: Predator Top 14, Premiership. Yeah. URC. Yeah. And test matches in November and in June. And I think all regular European leagues and Super Rugby and NPC. But NPC for me, it's quite a difficult league to bet. It's the only one because I have my Excels from since 2016. I think it's the only league I have in red. Right. With losses. The other ones are like around 10% yield, or something like that. Yeah. In the last 8 years. Yeah.
And Pablo, 2024 for you, has it been a good year so far? And also, if you had to compare it to when you over the last few years? How's 2024 going?
I'm talking about seasons because we know that you have to pay the taxes year to year. But when I'm talking about numbers, I'm talking about seasons. So now is the season 24-25, and it's been the best season so far in the last 8 years, because I'm almost 20% ROI right now. 20% for me is quite big, because my average is like around 13, 12 in the last 8 seasons. So I'm now up to 18.3. So it's quite big. I'm usually earn like 120, 140 units a year, more or less. Because, for example, the COVID year, the season ended like in February, March, so we lost half of the season. So I count that season, but usually between 120, 140, and a yield between 10 to 12, something like that. And this season, up to now, I'm in 81 units, so it's a lot for me. I mean, it's a really unusual season for me. I don't know why.
But long may it continue. I'm going to bring Admiral's got another question here, and I'll ask the question, and I'll get, is there a league that you really just do very well on? I guess a favorite league, call it one of the big ones. I mean, it's that's got the liquidity. Which, if I perhaps word it another way, if I had to say to you, you can only bet on one rugby league, Pablo, going forward, which one would you take? And you can obviously include internationals in that.
Look, I'm looking at my Excel. Because I have the difference between markets and leagues. I'm looking at the league market. This is since February 2016 up to September 2023. So I didn't refresh it in the last year, but more or less is this. Imagine that is the same in the last year and a half. So until September 2023. The league I have the best deal is top 14%. 14%. The second one is the Pro D. The third one is the Aviva, 11.5. The fourth is Super Rugby, 10.2, and the fifth is the URC, almost 9.97. I don't talk about Champions Cup or Challenge Cup because the number of bets I do there is like quarter of the other leagues, so you cannot treat it the same way. But between the five big leagues, the best one is top 14 for almost 14% yield.
There's some good figures there, and so it's consistent figures as well. I must say, to be honest, I don't keep records like that anymore. I used to, but if I had to look at my Super Rugby, it wouldn't be terribly good. I had a shocking start to the year on Super Rugby. Nathan, yourself, which leagues are the ones that have been the most profitable for you?
Yeah, I actually think probably agree with the URC thing, and because I think the way you framed it, like in terms of you had to just bet one, and I think it would be URC because there's 8 games in a round, so there's more games the better. Like, I just want as many games as I can get, really. I also think that, being able to evaluate something like, home field advantage between teams playing in South Africa and teams, not, I think is difficult for the general public to do. So I think there's probably like a bit of an advantage there. So, yeah, so I like URC. I can bet on that pretty easily. And I think the only reason I would say, same reason that why I wouldn't opt for Champions Cup, even though the results in Champions Cup are probably better than any of them, is just the number of games. But again, Champions Cup, because it has that nuance, right, where anybody can kind of look at or follow a particular league. Like maybe you watch UIC all the time and you can kind of make an intuitive evaluation about what a line should be or whether something's off. Difficult to do in Champions Cup, right? Because you're trying to evaluate teams that play in different leagues, and that is where I think, having some kind of model which incorporates, here's the rating for this team, in Europe, and here it is in their respective league, and then here's how strong these leagues are relative to each other. Like, I think that actually gives you a pretty big advantage as well. So I do like Champions Cup, but it's just not enough games.
Right, and any more questions from your side, Nathan, for Pablo? I know you said you had a list, and you've obviously asked him quite a bit, but have we missed anything?
Yeah, I've gone through quite a few of them. No, I think it's interesting because, like I said, we're doing things in completely opposite ways, and I'm always open to kind of partnering with people on things, and I think sometimes one of the things you'll hear other people say, like in other betting forums and podcasts and things, is finding people that win in different ways is good, because you're always coming at things from different angles. Like there is 100 different ways to kind of approach this, and they all have sort of strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes some sort of hybrid is a good thing. So yeah, you never know. Maybe we work together sometime.
Yeah.
Let's give. We won't go into detail on this question, but to end the show, the Admiral's asking, have any of you tried sevens betting? I'll start by saying I tried it and it just wasn't for me. I prefer the 80-minute game. Pablo, sevens, do you bet on it?
For me, it's really randomly. In 40 minutes, 7 against 7, there's a lot of variability, more than in rugby 15. So I tried to find value in the past, but I realized it was not for me. So it's banned for me at sevens.
Yeah, I don't do it either. I think it's too time consuming, because you have to be there, kind of watching all these games. It's not really something you can do in advance because it changes, and so it'll be at random times of the day. Also, I think there's not the liquidity in sevens that there is in other things, so it's with no disrespect to any other people out there, but when you're talking about ROI or units won or whatever, and you're saying I've won kind of this much on sevens, it's your unit size is completely dependent on what it is that you're betting on, right? So if you said like this is a 5-unit play on an international rugby handicap versus like a team total in a women's 7 game or whatever, your 5-unit stake completely depends on what your stake size is, because if you're trying to get if you use it size as $100, whatever it is, like no problem getting that into the internationals, but like, good luck trying to find $500 on the women's team total. Like, so, it doesn't scale. So you actually need to, you can't just put a unit size down and say it's going to be the same for both, because they're just completely different things. Like, it doesn't scale.
Yeah. It's almost the same for, it's almost the same for Pro Day. Is like the less liquidity league in Europe. So for me, it's if the liquidity was a little bit lower than that, it was a no bet league for me, because what you said is the same. You have to put. You have your stake, and you cannot change your stake because there's no liquidity in a league. And probably for me, it's a little bit above the limit. A little bit.
100%. Like, and I'll give you just a quick example. Like you said, I was working with a group to kind of get money down, like more than I could on, and working out of my own books. I tried doing that through this channel, through this group with Pro D2, and they just said, look, we can't find the liquidity to actually make this worthwhile. So it didn't work.
Yeah, actually on points, the liquidity for I usually don't bet Predator points, because the liquidity, you can put just 1 unit, for example, in my case. So I only bet on handicaps, and I'm thinking next year forget that league, because you have to spend a lot of time, and there are a lot more variables than in the other leagues for me, because Predator is a brainless league. It's really funny to watch, but it's really for me brainless. Really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. I mean, like, so there's an opportunity there. If somebody can find a way to get down money in that league however that is, like it's a very beatable league, but it's liquidity is a problem, right? So if if there's anybody out there that could say, hey, look, I've got 50 accounts that I can get down money on that league, then hey, come and talk to us, because we could probably use them.
Yeah,
reach out. Excellent, guys. Well, thanks very much. It was a great chat there. I will mention that I know there are some guys who do very well at sevens betting, but for me, it's all about, you got to find what you enjoy, and we can't all bet on everything. I have the odd golf bet here and there, but if I compare myself now, when I was young, I used to bet on anything that moved. I was one of those guys, And you find what you're good at, and you stick to that. And there's no need to move around and look for other, to bet on the sevens and that if you're going well on the 15s. So I think it's a case of each his own. But thanks very much, Pablo. Thanks, great having you on the show. Certainly enjoyed this betting strategy section, and likewise yourself, Nathan. I hope you got through all your questions there. But we can always do another show in the future and cover some more.
No, yeah, great to have the chat. Yeah, it's obviously not often in everyday life that you get to talk about these kind of topics. So it's it's very cool. Excellent,
Pablo. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks to the guys in the live chat. We kept a very strong live audience. We haven't had too many comments in this, other than the Admiral asking questions and Sir Champs as well. But thanks a lot, guys. It was great. We'll separate this section of the show as well and put it up so that we can, people can stumble upon it on YouTube in the months and the years ahead. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week for the Handicap Rugby Chat That Matters. That'll be 9 o'clock South African time.